Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you joining us today, we welcome you in. Good friend of the show, DW, he knows who he is, he's listening right now, had an interesting observation the other day. It's something I've kind of touched on before, but not in the detail that he brought out. It initially sounds like it's a diatribe against the Second Amendment types, but at the same token, it's not. Hear this thought out. People focus on the event of a societal collapse and how they're going to need to protect themselves. Now, I might be a liberal left-winger, but I've never really said I have a problem with people owning guns. I have a problem with ill-prepared people owning guns and not treating them with safety and respect, even more so in any sort of societal breakdown. Now, we just came through a societal breakdown in the pandemic, and hopefully it's gone away. But they're still fishing that Delta variant around. But it made us realize who we could really count on, who would come to us, and which of our friends had which skills. Now, personally, old Silverlight here is a jack of all trades. I can do a little bit of anything. My father is an absolute fantastic carpenter. Wood, even in a city like this is a tree I like to focus on a lot. There's a lot of wood there that you can make a lot of stuff out of. We don't have a particularly warm climate around here, being the Great White North. So being able to can vegetables and stuff like that would be the only way to keep your vitamin C levels going and to stave off scurvy during the winter. But canning, even preserving in glasses, I remember doing stuff like that when I was a kid. Used to do it with my grandparents and my parents. It's simply not done anymore. And that's a kind of skill that people need in the event of a societal collapse. Blacksmithing, don't underestimate it. Right now we have a huge supply of shovels and all that sort of thing all over the place. You go to the Home Depot and the shelves are going to be stocked. Any sort of shovel you want. But in a situation like the one we just went through, those things are not going to be available. Now, blacksmithing is a hell of a skill to learn. It involves a lot of specialized equipment and just watching people do it. I have no blacksmithing skill. But just watching people do it, first of all, you have to have a kiln, be able to heat the whatever substance it is. Let's pretend iron, because iron's pretty common. And you have to go to close to 1,000 degrees Celsius for that. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit, I'm sorry. So that involves not just wood, but making charcoal. Charcoal! The stuff you throw on your barbecue. Guess what? That's a skill too. You go and pick it up, you throw it on your charcoal, you don't give it a second thought. But you're going to take the wood from that tree, you're going to burn it and bury it. So that way it has more carbon inside. It essentially is enriching a fuel. So many people don't know how to do that. We get in our cars, we turn the key, and they run. But in a post-apocalyptic scenario, how far are you really going to be able to run your car? Any highway is going to be clogged to the brim. Most streets are going to be stuck with people on them. And in a Mad Max scenario, you're not going to want to go out very far anyways because the road pirates are going to eat you up. So whether it's your highways being blocked off by all the people who didn't plan ahead and got jammed in traffic, or simply because you have nothing better to do with your car is a wonderful source of materials. First of all, you got the wires in it. You can use them for cord. You can use them for wires if you have some way of generating electricity. And there are ways to pick up solar panels and at a reasonable price. The car itself, you're looking at a generator. And again, with a lot of cars having broken down, you could go siphon the little bit of fuel that's left in the bottom of those tanks and have a bit of electricity being generated for you. Same mechanism, by switching it to a foot pedal, you can generate electricity simply by bicycling. This is nothing that requires an intense amount of skill. My neighbor 3 doors down is a pretty darn good mechanic. The same token, you don't need to be a full-blown mechanic. You just need the knowledge of how an engine works. I might be dating myself here, but there was a time when we were taught home economics. And this brings up the images of a bunch of, teenage girls trying to bake stuff and sew stuff and everything. Okay, that would be a part of the course. Personally, I learned how to sew very early on. Having been in the military through the cadets and through the actual armed forces, sewing is one of the most valuable skills that you can possibly have. It lets me keep things that should be thrown out. It lets me sew up things. I can even make my own stuff. I'm not a fashion designer by any stretch of the imagination, but just a simple act of sewing is a survival skill that you can use. Thread is everywhere, and I imagine there will always be some. My mother is actually a quilter. What a hell of a good skill to have. Being able to assemble your own blankets, and quilts are warm blankets. I mean, really nice and warm. I'm nowhere near that level, but at the same token, you don't need to be at that level. Just a simple blanket, sew the corners together, that can get you through some pretty rough winter nights. Or even if you're in one of the southern areas of this world, Texas or something like that, a blanket makes all the difference as far as comfort goes. Soap. How many people know how to make soap? Not many. There's a few people that now know how to make hand sanitizer, which is basically rubbing alcohol and gelatin. It's more complicated than that. I'm just running that off. But that's literally all you need to know. Little things, because every little thing you have in a grid down scenario where somehow that there's no aid coming for you, and while I don't think the government would ever sit back and do nothing, there is always the possibility the government might not be able to do something. In a decapitation nuclear strike, the government might be in too much disarray to be able to help everybody. Certainly not for some time. If you live in a major area like Toronto, they'll be there a little quicker than they would in the middle of rural Saskatchewan. But Toronto's going to tear itself apart in a matter of days, whereas rural Saskatchewan, these people already know how to farm and produce most of their own stuff. They still buy stuff. Farmers are not like they were in the 1800s where you had what you had and that was it. Now farmers have tobacco as their crop or tomatoes as their crop or whatever it is. They are monoculturalists. No, it's monoculturists, not monoculturalists. Although I don't know, you get far enough out to the rural areas, anything can happen. The point being, farmers and people in general used to wake up in the middle of the night. And they wake up, say they go to bed as soon as the sun went down, and then they wake up about midnight. They'd have a little bit of a snack, beef tea, if you can believe it or not. And then they'd go about, they'd do a bit of reading, writing, they'd do whatever their crafts were. Then they go back because as soon as the sun came up, as soon as that rooster started crowing, they had to be out working the fields and getting stuff ready. Our 9-to-5 mentality is simply not natural. And the idea of a clock regulating us is something that has only come through since the 1800s. Before that, we followed a much more natural rhythm, and we took care of ourselves. People who lived in cities, some cities were better off, and they gave out free food, free stuff like that. Before welfare, there was a distribution of largesse, which was really the rich people's way of keeping the poor people from revolting against them. we do have a modern distribution of largesse. And I'm not against a social safety net at all. I strongly believe in one. Yes, some people are going to sit at home and do nothing, no matter what you do. Whether you give them money or you don't give them money, they're going to find a way to be able to do that. Sorry, that's reality. And it's only going to get worse as time goes by. I've said before, corporations are no longer a source for jobs. So what can we do to make sure our own house is in order? As you may recall, a couple episodes ago, I showed you that Silverlight Brewing Company is online. We're not selling yet. We haven't even bottled our first batch, to be honest with you. It takes time. But just knowing how to do that saves money. And a lot of things, if you can do it yourself, it takes time, but it saves you money. Look up your local regulations. It may be possible that you can have chickens. Chickens aren't really hard to keep or to take care of. You're going to have to build some sort of a heated shed for them, but in return, your egg prices are going to drop. And if you're a little more cold-hearted than me, you have meat at the end of it. Or maybe you sell the chickens to somebody else so they can eat them for their dinner, and you buy fresh chickens, or you have fresh chicken eggs in the incubator, whatever you choose to do. Doesn't take a lot of work. You just got to look at your local regulations, and soon you can have your own chicken farm. Or maybe you don't like chickens. What about shrimp? Shrimp are easy to raise. People are always getting rid of old aquariums. You could be raising shrimp in them, and there's ways to scale that up. But imagine never paying for shrimp again and always having a good, mercury-free source of fish wherever you are. That sounds attractive, doesn't it? Takes time, takes money, it takes ingenuity. But again, what can you be self-sufficient in? There will, of course, be the problem you have to protect yourself. And there's ways to do that. If you go online, I believe I've covered this before. I might have deleted that episode, but there's what's called the Anarchist's Cookbook. I don't recommend implementing most of the measures that they have, but there's valuable tips on how to defend yourself. Anything from being in a fight, first rule, avoid being in a fight, and up to building your own little personal rockets. That's certainly effective. And I mean, you don't need to worry about, when society collapses, will I be able to find 9mm or 5.56 millimeter times whatever the NATO standard is. You don't need to worry about that if all you need are matches, and matches themselves aren't that hard to make. Again, it's a potentially easy market. So use your weapons responsibly, and again, think of what you can be doing. Everybody has that little skill. Candlelight making, wax, and a wick. You could buy those supplies off Amazon, make a weekend of it, have more than you know what to do with it. But there you go. All simple, easy selections that you can use to make your life cheaper in the short term and more sustainable long term. Once again, thank you for listening. Special thanks out to DW for suggesting this topic in a roundabout way. And to everybody else, we hope you have a great day.